at Accenture in the banking strategy practice. She attended Ohio State University. She has BS in finance and economics. And while she was at University of Ohio, she led the financial literacy program where she met with one-on-one with 200 plus students and presented to various organizations on topics such as budgeting, student loans, and retirement planning. So let's start our session for today. Vatsa, take it away. Please put your questions in the chat and we'll have the email address also, and Vatsa will answer all the questions at the end. So let's go, Vatsa.
Perfect. Thank you, Bharti Aunty. Jai Jitendra, everyone. My name is Vatsa Mehta, and today I'm going to be presenting on an ultimate guide to mastering your personal finances. First off, I would like to thank Jaina's Women's Committee for giving this opportunity. Everybody has been a pleasure to work with, and I hope you guys find this helpful. Next, this is a disclaimer. Like Bharti Aunty mentioned, I'm a management consultant. This isn't my full-time job. I am very much an educational resource. I am not providing any legal, tax, anything specific on trading. So basically, long story short is please don't sue me after watching this presentation. So today we're going to talk about three main topics. The first being money basics, the second being saving and spending, and the third being managing debt. So first things first, I urge everyone to know how household finances work, even if your partner might be better at it or you don't find it very interesting. If you were left on your own to do this, everyone should feel empowered and able to take control. So thank you all for being here and taking the time to invest in yourself today. So here we have the money in and out map. If we look at this, every time you get paid, there's a variety of vehicles your money can go to. You have different accounts, and it all flows, right? So the great thing about technology today is this can all be automated. So you have your accounts connected and set up so you can automate any transfers from one account to another as needed. It's really important to know how many accounts you have and how much money is flowing in and out. If there's one thing you can take away today, it's to turn on automatic transfers, automatic bill pays, just so you don't have to stress and things will happen automatically. Each month, it's super simple. And once you've checked one or two times, oh, this has happened, then you don't even have to worry about it. A good example is I opened a new credit card and I thought my auto pay was on, but I didn't double check. And actually yesterday I got hit with a late fee. So luckily I was able to call my credit card company and say, hey, can you actually waive this late fee because I'm usually on time? And they were able to do that for me. But again, had I just checked that I clicked that button for automatic payment, I would not have forgotten to do that. The other nice thing about it too is when you have your investments going in automatically, you don't have to stress like, oh, I'm not investing. Things will automatically from your paycheck or wherever your income is coming from flow into another account. And then and if it's a automatically or like a robo investor or something of that sort, then you're just putting money in and letting it flow. So knowing where your money is coming from and where it's going and where you're holding it are three very important things. So like I said, we want to take inventory of all your money accounts. So one thing I would say is figure out how many accounts you have, their balances, things like that. So here's a little list. Definitely make sure you're saving your username and passwords because in today's day and age, that's huge. I know I always am resetting and forgetting, and I keep a nice protected Excel sheet of what account I have open, the username, the password. I also in that same file have a list of what the interest rate is. So if something is charging me money, then I can keep track of how much they might charge me. And that being said, if there's any fees or if there's a minimum in the account and how much that holds. And then does this account require me to have a minimum balance? Because sometimes what happens is if you don't meet their, let's say it's an account with Chase and they say you have to have a $500 minimum, then you want to make sure you have those $500 there, or else you might get hit with a fee. So that's an easy way to lose money, and that's exactly what we want to avoid. And if you're like me, sometimes I open random accounts just for the free bonus. So again, it's important to make sure that you're keeping track of all these accounts and figuring out how much you have and how much it's costing you. When we're checking in on our money accounts, there's a couple of different tools you can use for this. Here are my top 3 favorite. The first being Personal Capital. It's probably my favorite as of right now. I haven't had any issues with connecting my accounts. It's totally secure. It's a website and an app, and they actually have this nice feature where they will do a wealth consultation with you. And sometimes that person will suggest, oh, maybe you have too much cash, or you should consider investing in something like this or this. So it's almost like meeting with the professional. I think at the end of the day, they are trying to sell you something. So definitely take their advice with a grain of salt, but generally like the money tracking for the accounts is totally free. So definitely something to look into. I also really like mint.com. If you've heard of it, it's owned by TurboTax. So if you did your taxes through TurboTax this year, then they basically already have your information. So it's bank level security, not something you have to worry about. And it's really nice because I can connect my credit cards, my checking account, my investment portfolios, all to this app. And it'll show me a full picture. Like let's say I go to Taco Bell and buy a bean burrito, because I think the beans are Jane, but let's say I go to Taco Bell and I buy something, then the app will, when I refresh it, it'll know that I have spent $1 at Taco Bell. So it's very cool, and it'll categorize it like, oh, you spent this much on food at a restaurant, whatever it is. So it's a great tool. Some would say it's a little bit high tech. So if you're not high tech or like interested in Mint or Personal Capital, another great way to track is just by using Excel. That's actually something I do in addition to the apps. Is every 2 weeks, I'll go through my purchases and just see how much I've spent. And it gives me a good idea and makes me feel less anxious after spending money and being like, oh, I didn't do so bad this week or this weekend when I spent time with friends or something like that. So saving for long-term and short-term, one thing here to consider is SMART goals is what I like to call them. I think it's really easy to get stressed out about money and be like, oh, like I don't have money. But if you're not working towards a goal, whether it be short-term or long-term, it's really easy to kind of aimlessly be in tension. So like SMART goals can be anything, but you want to make sure that your goal is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. For example, if I say I want to be a millionaire by next year, I think that's a fantastic goal, but it's just not realistic or attainable. So this is an example of a SMART goal. Let's say your goal is to get fit and you're just going to say, oh, I'm going to get fit. A SMART goal example is specific. I'm going to start running daily and train for a marathon. Measurable, I'll follow the Nike app training program to run a full marathon without stopping. Achievable, I have done some running before. My body is reasonably healthy and the marathon is 6 months from now. Relevant, I want to be fit, healthy, and a strong person, and I will be full of vitality, energy, and zest for the rest of life. And time bound, I've signed up for a marathon 6 months from now, so I have to do this. So similarly, in the way of getting fit, personal finance is just like brushing your teeth. If you can brush your teeth every day, you can budget every day. It's that simple. And once you've created these goals, you can create different accounts, and those different accounts can be your buckets. For example, you want to buy a car, you want to go on a vacation, then open a savings account for that specific goal is another thing that I would consider doing as well. Speaking of saving accounts, you can invest in a high yield savings account. If you've been watching the news, interest rates have been going crazy since COVID. So I would preface this with it's not as good as it used to. There was a time where you were getting 2% back. So that's like $2 versus 2 cents in a high yield savings account versus a normal savings account. And so in my personal opinion, even though with interest rates at what they are right now, you are getting a little bit less than you used to, but you're still getting more than a typical savings account that you would have through a Chase or any bank that you would walk in the store to kind of go to. A lot of these high yield savings accounts are typically online banks. So we'll go into that further, but I think this is a great option. It's a very safe place to keep your money close, but not too close. For example, my high yield savings account is with Discover because at the time they had the best interest rate. And the nice thing is, like, if I need $20 for something, I can't just walk into a Discover Bank branch and take out money. Like, I have to wait 1 or 2 days to transfer that out of my account. And so that automatically kind of slows my ability to spend that money, and it almost forces me to save in a way. Versus, like, let's say I do need that money for a big purchase, then I can make that transfer and it'll happen maybe 2 days later. So yeah, examples of high yield savings accounts are actually right here. So I pulled this screen grab a couple days ago from nerdwallet.com, and typically you can see online banks have higher interest rates. So right now it looks like Marcus by Goldman Sachs is a 0.5% interest rate, which is better than what I think, like, when I checked it, a normal bank like a Chase or something, it was like 0.02 or something like that. It was pennies, versus this, you can at least get dollars back. Minimum balance needed. The website on NerdWallet will compare all of them, and they update it pretty frequently, so you can see what bonus they might be offering, and then it'll take you to the website as well, so you can learn more. So this is a nice little graph I made. So you can kind of see, like, in a standard bank, this is how much interest you're getting, versus in an online bank, you're getting a decent chunk. I think $1 versus $90 in a year is a pretty good difference, and I'll definitely take that over just $1. So definitely something worth considering. Then the next topic is building your emergency fund. This was probably my highest priority after paying off student loan debt. I think that cushioning yourself is super important, because if you don't have an emergency fund, you are leaving yourself susceptible to going into debt. I think I've seen too many people putting stuff on their credit card because they didn't have an emergency fund, and in different situations like this, it can be tough. And like, when you're spending 25% on credit card interest a year, that can definitely add up. And like, once you're in that type of debt, I think it's dangerous to almost lead to more debt. So definitely things to consider, and why you should have an emergency fund are for medical expenses, maybe your car breaks down, ideally not, but if there was a death in the family, let's say career opportunities, you get laid off, or loss of income stream for whatever reason, maybe a dental emergency, and then just for general peace of mind if there was a downturn in an economy. So then the next question is, how much money should you have in your emergency fund? I would say have 3 to 6 months of your critical expenses. And when you're making your budget, you kind of know how much money you're typically spending. So then that's how you can come to a number. So then that goes into saving and investing versus spending. I think there's a big difference between saving and investing. Saving means putting money away for later in a safe place, such as a bank account, so you have that if you need it. Investing is taking some risk and buying assets that will ideally increase in value and provide you with more money than you put in over the long term. And the reason I say this difference is, when you're investing, you are technically saving, but let's say something happens and the market is down and your money's tied up, you want to make sure you have a separate account for savings. So then that goes into tracking your spending. So earlier I mentioned budgeting and having 3 to 6 months of expenses, but how do you know that number? So your income, expenses, and priorities will change over time. So actively managing your budget and revisiting it quarterly would help. Maybe if you're revisiting it once a quarter. The reason I say this too is because, my budget in the summer versus the winter looks totally different. So I'm honestly constantly reviewing it, managing it. Not to say it should be something you're constantly stressed about, but it definitely shouldn't be something that you do one time and then you never look at it. If something's not working for you, let's say you budgeted $200 for food and find that you're actually spending $300 on food, that's something to go back, consider, and readjust. When first starting out, rule of thumb is to set a budget and take the average you spend on each category for the last 3 months. So that first 3 months in making your budget, you can kind of ballpark, but then say, by month 4, you realize, oh, I spent an average of $100 on gas, then that you can kind of leave that in your budget. So you kind of know it's realistic, because you can't say, oh, I'm going to spend $2 on gas, when in reality, you're spending a lot more. And again, this is where I like to use apps like Mint or Track in Excel. Definitely leave room for surprises and don't expect your budget to be perfect. I think surprises happen for me, honestly, every month, and some expenses may slip through the cracks, like the occasional impulse buy, or let's say you have to buy a flight. But you can take precautions to soften the blow. Set aside a bit of cash to cover miscellaneous expenses each month, and make regular contributions to an emergency fund. That way you can handle an unexpected car repair or other emergencies without taking on credit card or loan debt. So calculating your savings rate. This is fun. We get to do some math. So your savings rate is calculated by dividing your monthly savings amount by your monthly gross income, and then multiplying that decimal by 100 to get a percentage. You can also use your annual savings amount and your annual gross income for this calculation. And just to clarify, your gross is not after taxes. For households and individuals, gross income is the sum of all wages, salaries, profits, interest payments, rents, and all other forms of earning before any deductions or tax. So it's actually opposed to net income and defined as gross income minus taxes and other deductions. So like, that's one thing to consider, is like, this is including your income with taxes in it and not without. So you are paying taxes, but technically that's like included in your savings rate. So it is a little confusing. You can flip your calculation if you wanted to know how much you're truly saving, but by rule of thumb, if somebody were referring to their savings rate, that's the math that they're talking about. So we talked about budgeting. Let's say you are wondering, okay, so I want a budget, but I don't know how much to allocate. One template you could do is follow a simple 50-30-20 budget. And what that is the 50-30-20 budget suggests limiting your must-have expenses to 50% of your after-tax income. So before we were talking about income including tax, this is all after tax. So that leaves about 30% of that income that's left over for wants, and 20% for savings and extra debt payments. Your after-tax income is typically your gross pay minus income and payroll taxes. And that money is the money that goes to Social Security and Medicare. Your must-have expenses typically include shelter, because you have to have housing, food, transportation, utilities, insurance, and any minimum loan payments you might have. And it's basically any expense that can't be put off without dire consequences. You have to pay for bills, like you have to have your electricity. So obviously that should all be included and accounted for. You may also have other expenses that you see as non-negotiable, such as maybe charitable contributions, or like, let's say annually you're donating to the temple, and that's like something that has to be a part of your budget. You can include that in your must-haves if you're willing to cut back in other areas. So your wants typically include clothes, vacations, eating out, entertainment, anything that's nice to have, but can generally be cut back in an emergency without serious repercussions. And then this final category includes saving for retirement, emergencies, and other important goals, as well as extra payments intended to pay down the principal of what you owe ahead of schedule. Keeping your must-haves to, I would say, 50% after-tax income can be difficult, especially if you live in a high-cost area. Like I live in New York City, and it is very expensive, but somehow we're managing. So I totally get it. I think the payoff is a flexible budget that allows you to pay your bills and have some fun and save for the future. Plus, you'll be in a better position when you cover your bills. If you were to lose a job or suffer another financial setback, you'll have that savings there. So creating your own personalized budget, one thing I will say is your budget is going to look very different from my budget, and that's okay. I think a lot of people have in their idea like, oh, like you're comparing to somebody else, or you want it to be cookie cutter, but that's not the case at all. So when making your budget, like I said, you can use things like Mint, you can use things like Personal Capital. or honestly Excel, but like, let's say you have an Excel template. I would say keep the date, keep the expense name. Put the total amount that you're planning to spend or what you spent, the category, and then your description. So like one thing you could do too is like, in this example, this is an expense, right, that you spent. You can always track your expenses and then see how much is left over. And I think I like that version sometimes because it feels less constricting. But I think starting out, you should definitely try to fit within parameters. And then later on, if you wanted to say, oh, I just want to track my spending and then see how much I have left over and then invest or save whatever your leftover is after your income, that's a great option as well. So that brings us to our next category, which is getting out of debt. And we have a 4-step plan. So the first step is to organize your loans and debt. I think this is really critical because you want to know how much money you owe, what the interest rate is, who you have to pay back, and then how much payment you have to make each month. So I would also consider making a chart like this, where you have your loan name, your institution name, your loan balance, interest rate, and payment, and then you can list it out. So in this example, let's say you have a student loan, you can fill that out. And then let's say you also have credit card debt. Make sure you are also keeping track of, if you have multiple credit cards, how many you have, and definitely the amount and payment amount. Because like I said, if you're someone who has a lot of accounts but doesn't keep track, it can get very confusing. The next step is to see if lowering your interest rates makes sense. I think debt strategy is, again, something you should consult a professional over, but 2 key words to know is debt consolidation. So this is an opportunity where you can combine multiple old debts into a single new one, and ideally at a lower interest rate. So sometimes this is worth it, and sometimes it does save you money, but I think it does take a hit on your credit in some cases, which is why I'm not recommending it. I'm just saying, oh, this is something that exists and something that could be worth checking out. So making those payments more manageable or making the payment period shorter. These are a few ways you can consolidate debt, including balance transfer cards and personal loans. But again, please make sure you get all the information. Make sure you identify all the risks before actually pursuing this. Then the next thing is a debt management plan. So if, let's say you're facing a mountain of credit card debt and not making much progress, there are nonprofit credit card counseling agencies that can set up a debt management plan to cut your interest rate and put you on a repayment plan. So there are things out there that exist, and it is a way to potentially ease some tension. I think, again, not everything is a free lunch. So there are certain risks that are tied to it. But again, if you are in a lot of debt, it's worth asking, and talking to a professional to figure out a plan in that situation. And then the third step is to create a simple repayment plan. So here we have two methods. The first is the avalanche. That's the word on the street of how we describe it. But with debt avalanche, you focus on the account with the highest interest rate first, while making minimum payments on the other. So basically, you want to get rid of your debt, whichever has the highest interest rate. And you know that based off of the Excel sheet that you made earlier in the presentation. So then once you've erased that debt, you roll down to the second highest. And then you want to completely pay that one off and then repeat. Just because psychologically, once you check one thing off, you're more likely to feel motivated, more likely to feel better about it. So that's one method you could do. Or you could do the opposite, which rather than the highest interest rate, you're going to tackle your debt with the smallest balance first, while making minimum payments on the others. And then once you've erased that debt, you roll to the next smallest and repeat, right? So again, this one, in terms of interest rate, you might end up spending more money. But again, it's that psychological thing where you just feel better about paying off something first, and then you're more motivated to pay off the next. So just a good way to motivate yourself if it is something that you feel like you need. And then the last step that I will say is pay more than the minimum. the more you pay off your principal, the less interest you're paying. So definitely something worth considering. And then I will say, don't skip this step, but try using a debt payoff calculator. I know for student loans, this was a great tool. So again, NerdWallet is probably my favorite resource. There's so many different, there's so many different articles on literally anything, and they update it constantly. So it's really cool because you can put your account name, your account type, your remaining balance, what the interest rate is, and a minimum payment due, and it'll do a whole calculation on how you should approach it, and what will save you the most money. So again, it's just a fun little calculator that I would highly recommend. Honestly, I am a nerd, but checking out this website is super helpful as well, and probably one of my favorite resources. And then again, avoiding new debt and becoming debt free. This is where emergency funds come in. So as you can see, there's a lot of reoccurring themes, a lot of full circle items in this. So yes, like ideally you get out of debt and you don't get in debt again, but sometimes things happen, life happens, and you can get into debt again. At least you have these tools to kind of know how to tackle them. And that being said, not all debt is bad debt. For example, student loan debt, I think, is huge, especially in the Indian community. It's kind of a no-brainer. You're investing in your education. So while that term debt sounds scary, it's taking out some things if you need to is totally okay. I think when it comes to things like student loan debt, make sure you are looking at the best option. Too many times I've seen people, for their kids or even for themselves, they take out a private loan instead of filling out their FAFSA and going for a federal loan. So that's also something to consider, because your interest rates on a federal loan are going to be much, much lower, and sometimes subsidized from an interest rate perspective and how fast that loan is growing, versus private companies are obviously, they're kind of robbing you in a sense. So definitely something to consider. And then I realized I thought I had a lot of slides and it was going to take a long time. So I hope people have questions. But that is all I actually had for today. Our next session is going to be May 18th, 7:30. And our topic for then is going to be saving for retirement and investing basics. So that being said, does anybody have any questions that I can answer? And again, before we open it up to questions, thank you again to Jaina's Women Committee and Michami Dukram if I knowingly or unknowingly said something that may or may not have hurt someone. Thank you.
Thank you, Vatsa. That was very nice and very basic and good information given. And I hope I don't see any questions in the chat, but yeah, there is one thing here from Shubha Vora. Which websites you use to find good interest rates?
In what context? So what exactly are you looking interest rates for? Was it for the high yield savings account? Savings? Yeah. So NerdWallet is actually really cool. Actually, I can pull it up and do a live demo, actually. Give me 1 second. So if you go here, you can go to best of banking, and then it'll tell you best high yield savings accounts. And so if we click here, it'll show you that screen grab that I showed earlier in the presentation. So you can see here right now, and again, like the Fed is constantly changing. There's been a lot of news about it. So hopefully these, hopefully or not hopefully, it depends what side of the game you're on. But if these go up, then you would obviously be making more money on just your general savings. There's another cool thing that this is just like a fun app that I downloaded a few years ago. It's called Yoda. And it's kind of like a lottery, but for your savings. So for every like $20 you have in this account, they'll give you a lottery ticket, and then they'll give you interest, like 5%, 6% interest on it. So I, again, like not fully recommending, but this is just something that I've used that frankly, like I do feel like I make more money than like a typical bank account. So knowing these different like fun startups, it's totally safe. I've had it for a couple years now. And typically you're getting, oh yeah, here, perfect. So it's actually comparing the different interest rates. Like I said, like Chase gives you 0.02, they actually give you 0.01 according to this, right? So this is like something you could look into and potentially have a little bit more savings. Even if, and again, like this is where my emergency fund is. So I'm not like necessarily trying to grow my wealth in this account. It's more of just, oh, like this is a safe place to keep my money and like not let it devalue too much against inflation. Are they applicable to somebody in Canada? I think that's a very good question. I know NerdWallet might be. I think that's global. We can actually check because I am not sure off the top of my head. Yeah. Oh, just kidding. This is Air Canada. I'll look into that and actually get back to you for Canadian resources because I am not sure, but I'm sure there has to be a similar website for someone who were to live in Canada. And you guys can come on audio as well. The questions don't have to come through the chat.
Yeah, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask the questions directly.
Yes, Yoda is FDIC insured. I would never open an account for something that is not.
Any questions anyone has, you can speak. Unmute yourself and speak. Yes, Leelaben, please.
Hi, Varsha, it was excellent presentation with really tremendous amount of information. However, I think those who are not used to it, maybe they can use, if you can send a copy of your presentation and they can learn sort of at their own pace. I really found it excellent and very informative.
Yeah, definitely. I can export a PDF version and send that to Mamta and Dee.
And also we are recording this, let me tell everyone, we are recording this session and it will be put onto the YouTube and we will have the YouTube link available on the Jaina committee website. And also you can ask us with the email. You can send us an email and we can send it to you directly, the link for YouTube.
Hi, Vatsa, this is Shobha. Just wanted to ask you, the lot of children will be going to the college now, starting. So for them, do you have any advice what credit card they should look into it or anything?
Yeah, definitely.
Because it is a whole new adventure for them.
Definitely. That's actually what piqued my whole interest in personal finance was getting to college and realizing, oh, maybe I should build credit. So again, we're on NerdWallet, best credit cards. There's a couple of things and we're actually planning on doing a future session on this topic. So we're doing a session in May and as well as June. So that's perfect timing because it's right before college starts. So you can actually see student cards, but in a later session, we will go over this. But for now, if you do know someone, NerdWallet is great. You go to best of credit cards. It'll show you different best offers, travel, cashback, etc. And then they also have a list for your best student credit cards. And I will say personally, I did get the Discover Hit, and they give you like $50 every year for having a good GPA or like good grades. So they give you a good grades reward, even more of an incentive to do well in school. And also like referrals too, that they give you like $50 back every time you refer someone. So personally, I really enjoyed this credit card. I see a question. Oh, sorry.
Somebody has hand up there, SP.
Hi, yeah, hi. So this is Sona. So hi, Vatsa. That was a great presentation and thank you so much. I want to ask about the credit rate, like credit history building basically. So having more credit cards or more credit products, does that help to build better credit, or having less products help to build a better credit history?
Yeah, so that's actually a tricky question. Again, we are planning on doing this in a future session, but I will answer that question today since we have time. So what I would say is you don't want to open too many cards at once. So for example, like I have multiple credit cards, but I want to make sure that I'm spacing them out at least a year apart before opening a new account, because they check how often you're opening accounts. Because when you do get a credit card, they're doing a hard credit check, right? And every time you get a hard credit check, whether it's for taking out a loan or taking out a credit card, that is actually going to ding your credit score slightly. So the best thing you can do is there's actually 5 categories for building credit. The first is how long you've had credit open for. So that one is kind of like you have to give it time. The second is your utilization. So let's say your credit limit across all your cards is $10,000. Ideally, you don't want to be putting more than $3,000 on your credit card because they are looking at how much you're using it, right? Because think about it, your credit card is essentially a loan. And if you're taking out all this money, then they're assuming that, oh, like you don't have those funds. But in reality, when you pay that back, you're essentially showing how responsible you are. So then that's the third category is how quickly and well you are paying, making these payments, making them on time, and things like that. They're actually, here, I can probably pull up something from here. Let's see. Here, we can actually pull it up. But like, for example, building credit, there's 5 categories: length, utilization. I'm like totally, I know this, but I'm totally blanking on what the other 3 are. But it's basically like staying on time, not having too many at once, and making sure you're staying under the utilization. Those are like the biggest factors for your credit score and how to improve it.
Right. So basically, like I can understand it in this way that like we are approved for a more credit, but we are not utilizing, like we are not maxing it out basically. So like maybe keeping it at 30% or 35%.
Exactly. That's what you ideally want to do. And then you want to make sure you're consistent. Also, the other thing I will say is don't close your accounts. If there's no fee associated with that card, just keep the card open. It won't hurt you at all. In fact, it'll help you. And that too, like for your kids, I know you don't have to give them a credit card. So I'm not saying that, but I know my dad actually put me as an authorized user at a younger age on his credit card. So my credit, coming out of college was actually really good because I have technically been an authorized user at 18 years. I had been an authorized user for 26 years. So something like that actually does help you in the long run, or helps your kid in terms of building their credit, assuming you have good habits. There have been times where I'm like, Dad, you didn't pay your credit card bill on time, and I got dinged. So there's also that to consider as well.
Yeah, up till now, like I have the habit of, sorry, I'll just finish it off. So I have the habit of paying my card, like my full statement balance by the due date. So that's how I want to keep it. Like I cannot, I understand this interest part on the credit card, so I never want to get into that. So that's what I wanted to understand. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is a question in the chat box about 529 plan for the kids savings.
Okay, so other than 529, this is a really good question. You can actually open a IRA for your child. So if a Roth or traditional IRA, that's also another option. It's funny, I've seen a few articles about that, of how to make sure your kid ends up being a millionaire. If you are looking, obviously they can't take that money out until they decide to retire, but if you are planning on putting money away from them, could be a good way to just start putting maybe like a small amount and seeing how much it grows. Because at the end of the day, that will factor into their net worth.
How do you do that? The IRA for the kids?
Yeah, so you can say through any account, you can actually put in their age, birthday, everything, and then you can give them like an income, even if it's less, as long as it is a as long as it's through a provider that's not going to charge you a whole lot of money. I think Wealthfront is a good option for that. I know I have a Charles Schwab, and that requires a $5,000 minimum. But again, you could put that in and just let it sit and see how much it grows. So there are options like that that do exist. But again, 529 you can only use for college. Things like an IRA can only be used for retirement. So definitely things to consider. I know if you have like a lot of money to put away for your kids, there you can talk to a financial planner and they can open a trust. That might be a little bit of a long shot for most families, but definitely I would consider talking to a professional if you have a family planner for your finances, and ask them, and they can definitely open something up. But again, they might be charging you some sort of management fee or something like that, some percentage they would take.
Yes, Bakulaban has a question. Go ahead, Bakulaban, unmute yourself. You have to unmute.
I see a question in the chat. Does IRA for a child will it affect receiving a loan, a grant or loan? That's also a great question. I don't think it does unless it has a lot of money in it. Again, like usually when you're applying for any sort of grant, they're looking at your parents' income more than your own income. So that is something to consider, at least for the financial aid related scholarships. If you have a merit-based scholarship, then obviously, that's based off of your academics.
Good. So Bakulaban, you have any question? You have to unmute yourself.
As a host, are you able to unmute her from?
Okay, there.
Oh, okay, you got
Now
it.
I'm on.
Could not do
Yeah,
that.
what I was asking is, if you open an IRA account for them, is that gonna be just a regular IRA, or is that a Roth IRA, or how
That's
does
up
it?
to you. That's totally up to you. So I think usually they probably don't have income. So you would probably do in a Roth because it's after tax. So you're putting your after tax money in there. Again, I don't think you would get the tax benefit if you did that. It would obviously be under their name, but it is just something to consider, because think about it. If you're getting taxed on that money now, when you take that out, they will be able to take that money out tax-free. So definitely something to consider. And Series 1 bonds and EE savings bonds, I see a question in the chat. To be totally frank, I am not super familiar, but again, like any asset, if you've done the research, it's a great option. I know I'm invested in certain bonds, but again, I have a robo-advisor, so I'm very much like, I don't want to stress about this because I have too many other things to stress about. So let a robot do it for me. So I see that message in the chat. I know what's in it, but again, like making those decisions are tough, and that's not something I can necessarily advise on. And I see that somebody in the chat also said you can open an IRA account for grandchildren. So yes, children, grandchildren. I know a lot of non-Indian friends who have had the opportunity to have that from their parents. And believe it or not, I think at one point I had to overcome a little bit of jealousy in that sense, but there are a lot of things you can do in that sense.
I have a question about that. Is there a limit of your income for doing a Roth account for the kids or grandkids?
That's a good question. I think it's the same because it's based off of, the maximum is because of tax. So if you're putting it on their name, then you just don't get any tax benefit from doing it on their name, but that will grow, which is nice, right? Because it's like that income technically is like you're giving them income, like you're the payer, but you don't get a tax benefit. So the limit would be the normal one, whatever their income is. So if they have no income, I think the max is like 6,000. So you could put up to 6,000 in there.
That's a good thing to know.
And then Madhavanti, I think you have your hand up. You're on mute, by the way. I think you're still muted.
Okay. Yeah, you don't have to pay tax, on that income. I mean, the money that you're investing in the grandkids. Any kind of a IRA
Roth.
fund that you have for them. Yeah, Roth IRA or the plain IRA. But as long as it's, it's for the college fund. And once they are old enough, I think around 21 or 22, whatever amount you decide, that they can have it afterward, then you don't have to pay the tax. And that's a tax-free income for them too.
Yeah, so the 529 actually can be rolled into something else. If, let's say, your child ends up not using that money for college, there are other ways you can roll that money in.
This one I can tell you, it is not so, because recently I had to do that because my kids are done with their studies and everything, and whatever money was remaining, I wanted to roll over for them to use it. It was strictly not supposed to be done. If they can change the beneficiary to their kids or whatever, whoever's going to get it for education, but it is only to be used for the education or to be paid for. I mean, you can use it for paying the student loan, but
Yeah.
you cannot use it for anything else. That's what I
No,
was
it
told.
is for the college fund. It is for the college fund, and
College fund.
use it. Yes.
For
So
especially
what Madhuben is also saying that like you don't pay the tax as a grandparent.
Exactly. Yes.
So
And even
for
the
You don't-
kids don't pay
529,
the
Yes,
tax.
as a grandparent, you can give this money without paying the tax. That's what it
And,
is.
and even the kids don't have to pay the tax.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
529 is
Yes.
tax, it's usually, you don't pay taxes on a 529. So that's a little bit different, but a 529 is a great option for your kids, because even if they don't use it, like Mamta Aunty said, you can continuously pass it down. There are ways to switch it out, but again, when you switch it out, then there's some situations, right, where let's say you don't want to pass it down to your kid, let's say I had one and I don't want to pass it down, then I can roll it over into something, and I think there is a fee, maybe like a 2% or like some amount of fee, but then not necessarily paying the full taxes on it. So that gets a little bit complicated. So again, like with 529s, I think it's a great option to reduce your taxes. But definitely like something to consider, like how much you're putting in, and like how much the growth is going, because unless you are planning on saving for your grandchild, then it might not be worth investing so much in that account that can only be used for certain things.
what I have
then-
seen is that every state has a different way of doing it, and New York State is managed by Vanguard, and what they allow, New York State allows only $10,000 up to $10,000 of tax benefit, not beyond that. So you can go only up to 10,000 into that account.
Yeah, it definitely varies state to state.
Right. So, and then when you have to withdraw, the kid gets it for any other purpose, then they have to pay a penalty and taxes on it. That's how I was told. So I don't know if there is any other vehicle that they can roll it over to. I'm not sure about that. But when they are in the school and colleges, this is a very good vehicle to save the money with the taxes and for their benefit. Yes. Great. How much cash you can give your children each year in
Check, I think.
check or cash? $5,000 or more.
I mean, if it's
think
a
up to
gift, you
13.
can give as much as you want.
No, I think up
Uh,
to 13,000, right? 10,000 to
Up
13,000.
to 15,000 per parent per year.
Yeah.
Or
Per
now
parent or per child?
it is 16,000 now, I think. From last year,
Per
it had
child, right?
per child, per parent,
Per child by each parent.
by each parent, yes. So it is pretty good to give it, Any other questions anyone has?
I want to go back to the previous question which she explained to you about the credit cards. So, Varshita, you explained that if you have 5 different credit cards and if each credit card has a limit of say 20,000 or 10,000, whatever it is. But
Yeah.
if you're not using that much of amount, then you are asking us that we should call them and reduce that credit limit?
No, you want a higher credit limit. The higher your credit limit, the better off you are. What I'm saying is, like, let's say your credit limit if you add all your cards together is 100,000, you don't want to, your statement balance across all your cards ideally should not exceed more than 30,000. If you have 100,000 limit, you want to stay within a threshold. So the higher your credit limit, the better off you are. But they check like what your utilization is. So ideally you want to keep your utilization low. So with that too, it's like, oh, I want the points though, right? So I want to make sure that my credit limit is higher. And like, I'm not going to spend $100,000 in a month. Like that's crazy. Well, maybe not crazy, but if I could, maybe, but just kidding. So you just want to make sure you're below that amount. So like, for example, in college, I just started out, I had a Discover credit card, right? And one of the years I commuted. So I said, because I'm saving money on rent, I'm going to buy $1,000 like parking pass. Okay. And I actually did see my credit score dropped a little bit. And the reason was your utilization was very high, but the reason was because my limit wasn't. So like, the longer you have a credit card, your limit will consistently go up. Like every year it'll go up. So that's also a good thing. So yeah, hopefully that
But
answers
then
your
we get scared that, like, suppose if anybody, if your credit, you lose your credit card, and if you have a higher limit, then you're not going to be in any kind of trouble. Like people can utilize your.
So you don't want anyone to use your credit card, so don't lose it. But like, let's say you do lose it. This happened to me as well, where I dropped my credit card on campus, like literally lost it. And then I'm in the football stadium and I look at my phone. That's why you keep your alerts on your phone. If you have an iPhone, highly recommend doing that, because I look at my phone and it's like, oh, this charge was made at some restaurant. And I was like, I didn't go there. But again, that's the best thing about a credit card versus a debit card is with a credit card, let's say something happens like that, you can call them and say, hey, this was fraud, and then they'll send you a new card. So like I got all that money, that $100 that guy took my card and kept trying to spend it, I got all that back, versus if it was my debit card and he was swiping it, my bank would not have given me that money back. I would have lost it.
Because we cut down, like, we have a higher credits and we say, oh, we don't use that much. So we call them and we ask them to reduce.
No, don't do that. Just leave it, or hide your credit, put your credit cards in some safe and then don't take them out if you're scared of using it. But I would not, I've never heard of anybody doing that. So I would tell them, bring it back up.
Okay, good to know that. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And also another thing I would say that check your credit card statements very carefully every time, so that you know that there's nothing else going on. Emergency alerts, like she said, sign up for the alerts, but also keep looking at that. It's very important.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Mamta.
Right.
So Vatsa, my question is, I just thought that, closing a credit card is when you are not using it for years together. It's a benefit rather than going against you.
It's a benefit in the sense, like, does that credit card have a fee? If it has a fee and you're not using it, then that makes sense. But if it doesn't have a fee, I would leave it open, right? Because they look at your length of credit history, and when you close something, you don't like lose it necessarily, but you kind of do in a way, right? Like you want to leave that history there. So again, that's one of those situations where if you're not using it, and there's no fee associated, then put it in a safe and keep it with your gold and don't touch it.
No, over the years, I have so many different cards and so many different things. So now, I don't have no use for it. So.
And I think that's too, like, if you have like 20 cards, right? Then I think in that situation, it's different. But let's say you had like between 1 and 5, then maybe it's worth keeping that 5th one, the one that you had the longest, open.
Mhm.
And also too, like, it only matters if, like, for me, for example, I live in New York City. So anytime I want to move apartments, they're going to check my credit before they give me an apartment, right? So I have to make sure my credit is high, my credit score is high, or else they might say no. But sometimes if you're in a position where you're not buying anything, you're not really moving around, then it's like, it affects you less almost, right? Your credit is essentially your report card for a loan, or like how responsible you are with money. And if you're settled too, then maybe for you, like you're relaxing, you can just relax. For me, I have to stress about it.
Just because I'm at the age, I don't need to worry about all the things. that you-
Exactly. You should. That's the best part about being at that age, right?
And the
You know,
other thing, is,
yeah,
now
yeah.
that the credit card score is getting over 800, I never saw that before.
Yeah, they're getting much better
Things are
now
like-
because which higher scores are being given. Before it
Yeah.
was not possible.
Before they were not giving ever more
No.
than 780 or 700, Now I see quite often it's more than 80, 800, 850. I kind of feel like, what's going on here?
Hey, higher is good in my opinion.
Of course.
There is a
Yeah.
question in the chat, I think, about.
If your
the-
bill goes to collection and you get to know after it happens, what are the options? You could try to fight it, but I think options here are tough. You could try to fight it. I know, for medical expenses and things like that, usually there's a way to advocate, but for a credit card bill, this is a little tough. Sometimes, I hate to say it, but sometimes you have to pay it. But again, like I wouldn't pay it without trying to fight it first.
What I have seen in this one, and this is my experience, if you talk to the credit card company and say, okay, I was delayed in paying, I'm going to pay it now, and you work it out with them, sometimes they allow that and the collection agency goes away from you. And it works out good for you.
Yeah, sometimes.
Right,
My
sometimes.
my experience is generally, if you have a good credit all the time, they would let go lots of things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Even
that is
yes.
true.
Even a late fee, like that's what happened to me. I mentioned earlier, I got stuck with a late fee because I made a mistake, and they were like, "Yeah, that's fine." And
Yeah.
also too, like you can always, this is a Jaina call, but you can always like threaten them and be like, "Hey, I'm gonna change companies, like change credit card providers. Like I don't want to deal with you guys. I want to go to someone else." You can say that because at the end of the day, they want your business.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Well, so I have a
Also
last
for the,
question. Can I ask?
I would interrupt 1 minute for the collection. If you have a bill, you can always bargain with them too if you are in time, like not afterwards, but before. And they do give you a break.
Yes,
Yes.
that is true.
Yeah, I think the main takeaway from that question is don't be afraid to stand up for yourself in any situation, right? Like you are your own advocate. So if you don't call them and if you just like let it go, like that's something you shouldn't do, right? Like it's hard to pick up the phone and call someone, but just do it.
And
Yeah.
if it's a big amount, you can do a monthly payment.
Yeah, you always can work out something with them. People are ready to work it out with you. Very good.
But so I have a last question. Can I ask you one more question?
Of course.
Kalpana, but how did you decide it was last question?
No, because I think you said the time is 8:30 and we are close
Yeah,
to
I know.
8:30. That's why I'm
I
asking.
was just going to say, let's close, but go ahead with your right.
So I just have a question, like, you said that IRA for the children, like if you put it into their fund, we don't have to pay. If we pay into their college fund, we don't have to pay tax and they don't have to pay the tax. But suppose if I max out my savings into that year, like in a year, if I'm allowed only up to 27,000 put it into the pre-tax money, right? In my 401k or 403b. After that, am I allowed to put it into the kids fund?
So here's what I would say. And I found an article, so I'm gonna share my screen. But so first things first, obviously your kids' priority before retirement is college, right? So I would max out in terms of order, I would max your 529, do that, right? Let's say you have even more money, then you can open a IRA for your kid. And the nice thing about a Roth IRA is it's essentially a savings account, and then whatever gains they make, you can't take out the gains, but whatever you contribute, you can withdraw. So that's like one thing, but the child must have some sort of earned income. So like if you do have a business or something, you can say like, oh, like this person made this much money, even if it's a small amount, you can still do it. It's just something that in terms of your tax forms, you will have to kind of fluff. But Bharti Aunty is a CPA, so she can maybe help you out with that. So like this is what it says, right? Like it does have a limit. You have up to $6,000 per year per kid. But like things to kind of consider is you know, you can count babysitting as an option, right? So in terms of limit, I think it does depend on how much earned. It's a total of earned income for the year or the 6,000. So whatever's less, right? So it depends on how much money you quoted that your kid made in that year. So like let's say they have a job and they're working at Starbucks, then you can honestly match their income and put it in an RA if you wanted to. That's also something you can do.
Ah, okay.
Well,
Now,
that's nice.
can you explain that a little bit more?
I think you have to take a one full session on this.
Well, that's the next
Yeah,
session. That's the
Yeah,
next
because
session.
no, I really would like to know a little bit more on this way, especially on this subject.
Yeah. So this is the next session. So that if this, I'm happy to take more questions, but if this is the last question, then it's a good one to end on. But this is like a really good, again, like I feel like as Indian people, we're really good with money, but like I've noticed, at least in my personal experience, my friends who are not Indian are the ones who kind of come out ahead in this sense because their parents know all this. So it is super helpful. So we'll definitely talk about this in the next session.
There is one just last question in the chat. Somebody just said about the I-bonds. What do you think about I-bonds?
What do I think? Oh, wait, let me look at the chat.
And then another popped up.
I mean, okay, so I see a question. I mean, according to this article, and I trust because it's from NerdWallet, it says there's no age restriction. So I think that's what I mean. Like you have to at least be able to produce some sort of tax form.
But
And
the
then-
child has to be earning something, right? The 1-year-old doesn't earn anything.
Yeah, but so that's what I'm saying. Like if you fill out a form and say like, oh, like an allowance, technically, like as a parent, if I'm paying you $100, then like that can be considered as earned income, because think about people who don't necessarily have a real job, but they get paid cash. They still have to pay taxes by law, right? Like if you have a construction worker that comes and you're paying them under the table, they might not report that money, but at the end of the day, they might have to. So you can kind of claim like, oh, this person made, you know, $200 and then match that $200 in an IRA. There is a way to do that. It's a little bit complex, but it is possible.
What are the I-bonds? Because
Yeah,
they're
so-
7.12.
Hello.
Yes.
Okay, even the child earn the chore money, like if they do something around the house and you make a deal with them that, okay, if you do this work and I will give you $5, that is considered as income too.
Right. It should be. But
Yeah,
here
so-
is the grandchild is 1 year old. So that's what I'm saying. For 1
No,
year
no,
old.
1 year old kid, no, I'm talking about the earned income problem, you know.
Yes, yes, yes. I understand that. But then if the child has any investments done in child's name and that investment earns the money, that is not their earned income, right? It is not taken
No,
as
that earned income is not that interest money.
right. Okay.
Yeah, so there really is no age limit. What it comes down to is being able to produce a tax form. And again, like I said, for a young child, I only recommend doing a Roth IRA for your kid if you've covered their college expenses. So like it's the same thing, right? Like in terms of how we kind of level like what we want to invest in, you have to think about like what's your top priority, and then if you have so much money and you're like, okay, I want to put more money in, then this is the next best option. So we're not saying this is the best option, we're saying this is a option if you've already maximized your 529 or any other tax break or tax deferred account. So I think we did go in a little bit of a rabbit hole, but I just want to clarify to everyone that this is a option, not the best option at, you know, depending on your circumstance.
Right.
That is true.
So thank you so much, Vatsa. I think we will just stop here. And anybody has questions, please send it on Jaina Women's Committee at Jaina Women's Committee at jaina.org. So please send your emails there, and we have put that email in the chat, Women's Committee at jaina.org. I'm sorry. And if you have, we will be having the YouTube link of this whole session soon available. And if you want, please send us your emails and we will send it to you. Okay. And we really appreciate everyone joining us. And we are having ongoing discussions about the finances once a month. So please look up for next date. It is May 18th. And it will be at the same time, and the same Zoom link is going to be working for that also. All the financial seminars are going to have the same Zoom link. So please feel free to come and just join in and come with your questions and everything. And we really appreciate all of you coming here and joining us today. Thank you so much.
But I have one thing to request. If you could give the subject, like what it will be on the next seminar before
she
the
has
day
that.
before.
Yeah, she has that. She will show you right now.
Yeah, give me 1 second. Let
Thank
me
you.
pull up the slide and we can flash it up.
And it was very informative. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. Here, let me share my screen. And then see, why is this frozen? Sorry, give me 1 second. Yeah, so this is our next session, May 18th, 7:30 p.m. And the topic is saving for retirement and investing basics, which is kind of what we covered in the questions, but we'll go more in depth.
More details on those things in coming sessions.
Savings for retirement.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
Vatsa,
so
very much, Vatsa. We appreciate that. And Dipali ji and Vatsa are two leaders who are with us for the financial literacy program. And we appreciate them. And all our committee members are here. And I thank you all of them and all the audience, whoever is there here. I really appreciate your coming here and listening to our sessions. And I hope that you have been benefited with that and you will come back again on 18th of May. Until then, Jai Jinendra, everyone. Thank you.
Jai Jinendra, the
Thank you.
presentation was very
Bye
good.
now.
Vatsa, okay?
It was
Thank
very
you.
good.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Vatsa.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Sure. Thank you. All right, so I'll talk to you all later on. Thank you, Vatsa, again. I'm going to end the thing. You have any questions for me, Vatsa?
Nope, I'm all set.
Okay, so we'll
The
end.
presentation was really, really good. I enjoyed it.
Thank
Very-
you. I'm
very
glad.
nice.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take
Jai
care.
Jinendra.
Bye-bye.
Hey,
Jai
Jinendra.
Jinendra.
Jai
Bye.
Jinendra, everyone. Bye-bye. Good night.
Good
Jai
night.
Jinendra.